Okay, so here we enter turn 40, 1685. Got some interesting stuff going on. First of all, it doesn't really cover it in the rules, but it seems to imply the way there's this mutual, one single ruler over two countries in the case of the Dutch with William of Orange. It doesn't make sense to roll survival rolls for both. And events that affect one should affect both in some ways, which is to say, in particular, I made a survival roll that said, hey, things are going well enough. Actually, that shouldn't be the case because of the poor stability, so I'll remove that. But if you get the extended lifespan roll, it shouldn't happen. But the other one was a crisis of madness, which also occurred this turn after I'd made that decision on the Dutch side. And it's like, well, yeah, and it kind of makes sense. If you're ruling two countries, maybe it would be more likely that you'd go crazy, right? I got some people to bring in that I didn't. The Royalists don't matter. Stuart's not too important, and these are Hanoverians. Okay. So, another event that came up, a couple of more of the country ones. Spain got epidemics. Turkey got agricultural techniques, extra money basically, or Spain got less money. Not a lot going on there. But when we started rolling for the specific events, the political events, the first one that came up was a slave revolt. I think that's from the next period actually. Over here we've got a few little revolts. Those are going to be a little pain in the ass. In the midst of a war, it's kind of hard to deal with that kind of stuff. But they're not too dangerous. Also got a diplomatic shakeup, and that ended up dropping two countries out of the war. Three: Denmark, Parma, and I'm trying to remember who else. The other one was a larger one. Denmark, Parma, the Palatinate, and they're now available again for people to do diplomacy on, but they've gotten knocked too far down the diplomatic chart, I think in all cases actually off the chart, so that they're not, involved at all anymore. The, let's see what else we got here. Oh boy. Reversion of the Edict of Nantes, a revocation of the Edict of Nantes as it should be written, but the book doesn't do it that way. And who knows? Could be titled differently elsewhere. Anyway, essentially, the effect on the French is quite disastrous. They lost a level of DTI and FTI. Now, those are things I track over here, but essentially, what they really do, they affect some of your ability to expand trade, to build manufactories, etc. They also are this big hunk of money. And for France, the DTI, the domestic, is actually quite a high valued thing. And the foreign is pretty high for everyone, although France being as large as it is, it's less important for them to have foreign trade. So this is a big hit to their income. It also caused a revolt. It caused them to lose merchant fleets. Now, all their merchant fleets are zeros at this point, but they have these sort of notional merchants that would be in place if this war wasn't going on. So I made a command decision there. Yeah, those would probably transfer over because there's merchants involved in this. They're shifting over to the Dutch, but they would transfer over as non-existent ones. And they all went to the Dutch. They don't have to. They have to go to a Protestant power who has merchants in the same area. Well, in almost every case, that was just the Dutch. The only one exception was in the Irish Sea. They had the choice between the Dutch and the English. They would rather give the Dutch an edge over the English in terms of the trade things, because it would be better if the Dutch get the Atlantic Trade Center. From the French point of view, they would rather see, they think the English are more of a problem. Although with Ireland almost falling at this point, if Ireland secedes from England, that puts England in some serious problems. So they're going to have to shift their troops over there. And then the final one, China demanded the destruction of these colonies, and they want to absorb that territory into the empire. Well, Russia said no. This is kind of a crapshoot. I would say the Chinese have the edge here. They've just gone to war with Russia. It's kind of a reason you don't want to build colonies near the Chinese border, because this event comes up and it hurts you. And you can avoid it by being up here and maybe over here, but I didn't want the gold mine, whatever. I could have just instead gone doink doink to here. In particular, though, I think there was a desire for the Russians. They have a victory condition where they want to be next to Manchuria. So they were following that as well. Anyway, if China were really, really low tech, like medieval tech, and they're not, they're actually at arquebus, which means they get to fire. This would be kind of a crapshoot. Russia could conceivably win this in one round and destroy and send the army flying. They wouldn't destroy it because it's just too huge. But that army is 600 strength points. It's unreasonable, but it will destroy the Russians probably. It will win this. The Chinese will accept a white peace at any time in exchange for the treaty provisions. So there's not a huge risk here, but the Russians do kind of want to fight it. If they can somehow win this, I have to start thinking, because there are no rules in the game that allow you to say push the Chinese into allowing you to build colonies in their, or trading posts in their territory, reopening up China. So I have to look back in the rules, make sure that I'm correct there, that there isn't a way, and decide whether or not I want to allow one if there is. I think it would require a level 5 victory. And then it would open China up. Would it open it to everyone? Probably, which may not be well worth it. But another option, of course, is to actually conquer territory off China. If you take Korea from China, for example, then, well, you can build your own colony or trading post there if you wish. All right. So, beyond that, I don't know, not much else. On to the administrative stuff. All right, well, I had a couple of errors that I discovered and tried to rectify. One was I forgot to roll to see if the Prussians entered the war. They didn't. The other was there were some Venetians back here who were being pirated privateers from the Turks that were in place that I forgot to resolve last turn. So I did that and then realized that because of that, the Dutch got the Mediterranean Trade Center. They had been exactly even with Venice, and I had miscalculated that in the economic phase. Anyway, what ended up happening, they got the extra trade center over here, which is pretty potent. But that shifts a little bit of extra cash into the Dutch hands, which maybe the Turks didn't want to do, but they didn't have much choice in the matter. They thought they were making their own race for this. Now they've got to try to fight the Dutch down. Economic-wise, everybody's in real trouble. The English had enough money and actually a lot to spare. They took out a loan and ended up in pretty good shape, but everyone else is just rock bottom, not able to even, with whatever loans, whatever else they're taking, not even able to do any kind of colonization or build up their armies. The French army, they were able to build maybe 20 infantry and that's it. Everything else had to hold off. But the neutrals, of course, do fairly well because they're not really affected by the war. So the Portuguese have a new army. Hanover has a new army. Habsburgs didn't end up so well. They ended up with an army minus. But overall, things were in pretty good shape for the alliance because they've got so many miners on their side that even though the Dutch and the Spanish are just totally strapped for cash, the English have enough, but they're primarily worried about trying to resolve their problem in Ireland before that ends up becoming a free area. They've also got the problem down here, but they think they can let that hold off until the war's over. I think the war is going to end pretty soon. It may end in a Spanish surrender just due to, well, see, the problem is the French are behind right now, and they're probably going to keep being behind. So it may not end this turn, because even though Spain has to offer a peace, they don't have to offer a white peace. They can't in this scenario. So, well, France can either take whatever they're being offered. Last turn it wouldn't have been too good. It would have been the loss. Or they can keep going and maybe end up turning this around. But France is having trouble. They've got revolts breaking out. They've got issues going on there. Their own economy is just shattered. They don't see how they can continue on. But it's not like the other side's doing terribly well. The Turks are poised to move in. We've got a third Spanish king being deployed. They keep getting these 9 military leader kings. This one didn't end up too good, though. The last 2 were pretty good. This one's a 3-2-1. That's actually a worse leader than they have on the field. And it's kind of risky to have your king on the field. He probably will retire after this turn. Not continuing with this. But they're getting some really great Habsburg military leaders for that. The Habsburgs themselves are also getting good leaders. Although their top-ranked one, Ferdinand, is not so hot. And Maximilian's not so hot. But some of their back-end ones, Starhemberg and, Montecucculi, of course, Commercy. They're all pretty good. They could be loaning them to other people, but there's no real advantage to that sitting out here right now, except maybe to the Portuguese or something, but they've got Tuscan reinforcements coming in, etc. I don't know. I don't know where it's all going to boil down to, but at this point, Turkey's the only one really with a free army other than the neutrals that significantly poised to do anything. We'll get to the rounds and see what happens. Let's take a look at the first part of the round. The Russians are pushing an army, trying to get it all the way down to the east coast of Siberia to face those Chinese army. It's kind of a hopeless task, but we'll see. Some stuff going on here. This is only halfway through the round. The English went and captured this French colony. They can't just destroy colonies. It's kind of a pity. They'd love to just start wiping out the French, but there's just too many people, etc. It's not like a trading post. Over here in Europe, the English are setting themselves up to move into Ireland. Spanish gathered their forces together so that they could face Luxembourg to some extent. New siege laid in Ancona. Habsburgs gathered their forces. Again, these troops, where they're already engaged for a while, they've taken, attrition losses, etc. They just want to make sure they've got enough to take the city if they need to. Up here, Orange moved in and into siege Paris. Villars intercepted him. The higher tech, Villars took a lot of losses. He took like 30 losses, but he won a major battle. As you can see now, I'm following the rules and pumped up the along with huge amounts of victory points, etc. Totally wiped out the Dutch army, killed cohorns, and here we have the Swedes beginning a siege in Picardy. They wanted to be in a coastal province so they could ship an extra unit in there. They were only allowed 1 stack because they're an expeditionary corps. We have Hanoverians moving into place, but Villars is taking the place of Condé in terms of effectiveness. One thing is the Dutch are still behind in technology. They're still back in the Baroque period, essentially, because they haven't crossed this line yet. Everyone else is beyond it. You can have the Latins beyond the naval technology, and the Dutch are still not past that into vessels yet. So in a sense, the Dutch are holding up progress for everyone else except for Russia. Russia could have pumped themselves over it too, and probably should have given the war they're involved in, but they're so low on money. Anyway, onward. And coming to the end of this first round, the French made an attack down into Maine, got repulsed. They only have 1 native ally this turn in the Quebec natives. And it really isn't enough for them to do much there. All they can really use it to is to defend Quebec and the Hudson Bay and maybe the Great Lakes area. And they lost their leader temporarily for that. They also positioned Frontenac to counter the Spanish-Dutch threat. Over here, Villars continued his run, moved up and attacked the Swedes. He's a bit more bloody-minded than Condé was, at least in terms of how this is going. He lost another 10 troops this time. Condé was just, rolling huge rolls against very small rolls continuously. Villars is rolling huge rolls, but he's facing pretty good rolls too. The Dutch rolled like a 9 or a 10. The Swedes rolled a 7. So he's taking some significant losses. Luxembourg cleared up the revolt. The Turks landed at Catalonia with half their army, or almost half, more than half. Basically, they need to push this up against... Oh, I forgot to move these. They need to push this up against... force Spain into a position where Spain's actually really threatened by Turkey. Although Spain really probably needs to get to a peace with Turkey and will lose eventually. It's easier if you're marauding through their home country. So the other option was, of course, to land at Baleares. This seemed more violent and more likely to end the war. Turkey's got a lot of troops. The only problem is most of them are pinned behind the Venetian fleet. They managed to slip troops into Malta before Venice was in the war, back when they had a deal with Spain. Spain's really pissed about that. End of 2 rounds. What do we got? Frontenac has destroyed the Spanish-Dutch forces that were invading Louisiana. He's moved up to take on the English. Chinese destroyed the Russian forces that were back here. Now, we got a whole army coming as well, but they laid siege out here to Vladivostok or whatever, and I don't know if the Chinese are liable to win the siege in terms of they've got to get kind of lucky and running out of time, etc., before that army gets there. And they chose the harder of the 2 sieges, the reason being they wanted to wipe out those forces, because with them running around they could perhaps disrupt the siege, but that didn't happen. English landed in Ireland, taking things. Turks landed here in Barcelona. The Spaniards drove them out, and now they're over here in the Baleares. Portuguese laying siege here. Villar took out the Hanoverian forces, but he was wounded or sacked or something because of it. And now he's not available, which means only Luxembourg's available. The sieges in Italy are continuing. That's about it. So we pull into the 4th round now. A little bit of engagement here. The Frontenac went up. Pretty much destroyed the English army up there, but he didn't succeed in driving them completely off. Over here, the English working in Ireland still. Spanish army destroyed this time by Luxembourg and his superior French cavalry army. We're doing kind of a weird dance here because Luxembourg and now Vauban are there. Vauban you don't want involved leading an army. Unfortunately, that's what the French are down to at this point. You want him leading a siege. Now, the French army over here has gotten weaker, so now Vauban and Luxembourg have to switch who's where. And that's going to be kind of troubling because you want Luxembourg attacking the Portuguese army that's sieging down here, and you want Vauban to try to take something out. Now, he could take Roussillon out, or he could take Alsace out. He's actually within range to hit Roussillon, so maybe he'll be able to get there. Another alternative, they put Stuart, and this is not a king, so he can lead the French troops. I had some question about that. He might push up and try to defeat the Tuscan attempt that's going on to take the Romagna. The Russian-Chinese situation, well, the Russians are almost there, and the Chinese aren't getting very far along. So there's a chance that something could break here. The problem is the Russians can't really damage that Chinese army. It's a real army. It's not a native force. So it, can actually operate outside its territory as it's doing, and it can also retreat and do stuff like that. The way I play the rules, the native armies are in real severe problems because if they have to retreat and they have nowhere to retreat to, so they're kind of destroyed by that. That's kind of an edge to allow the colonization to the level that happened historically. Otherwise, you really can't defeat the Aztecs. You have to fight them every round and beat them every round, and that's almost impossible. Well, this is almost impossible with that big Chinese army. But if you beat it once, maybe you can get a peace condition, maybe you can get a white peace or something, and be able to keep the territories that you want. Actually, gaining something on China is going to be tough because China does have a modifier there. The Turks, well, they've expanded their sieges. Without the Spanish there, there's not much to defeat them, or to fight them even. I kind of cheated there accidentally, and I'm letting it stand. Some Portuguese came in and attacked them. Well, I don't know who to affect with that, so I kind of affected both Portugal's standing in the war with France, as well as Spain standing with Turkey, and just kind of made a command decision there to, you know, assess that in some way, because it doesn't make any sense what happened. It was actually an illegal action. But things like that do happen, where a state that's not at war, but is at war with someone else, will end up fighting someone that's not, historically, so why not? The Venetians knocked out the Turkish privateers, and a lot of other stuff going on. The Dutch took out some of the Cyrenaians. All just kind of confusing stuff happening everywhere. And that's the end of the rounds. Frontenac managed to clear the English from here. However, he died in the process, and we've got a replacement there. He managed to take the fort, etc. A fairly significant swing elsewhere. Luxembourg drove the Portuguese army to near extinction down here. That's about the end of the Portuguese army, except for what they have way over here. They could try to sail that somewhere, I guess. But our rounds have ended here. Stuart was successful in fending off Max Emanuel, and I believe he destroyed the Hungarian Habsburg army. There's a slight Bavarian force there, but it's smaller than the Genoan force. It's really ugly there. The Turks moved into Valencia. They get to maintain that siege. It's looking very bad for Spain there. The English have cleared Monmouth and are kind of doing a pretty good job on their territories, but they haven't quelled that revolt or even really gotten it under control. It's still going to spread and be bigger than, well, not than it was, but bigger than it is now, certainly. But the fact that they've cleared one territory completely is helpful, and they've reduced some of the revolts elsewhere. It's looking pretty ugly, though, for the alliance, and I honestly don't know what the chances of Spain getting out of this successfully. And to tell you the truth, with England and the Dutch so hammered, they may want a rematch rather than try to continue the war if Spain falls out of it, because they're just at so many penalties built up. We could look at their numbers and see. I don't think they're in the lead, and the Netherlands certainly doesn't want to keep this going. England has a big minus on it, and France does not, which means England could be forced into a surrender that they don't want. So they may also be best off just letting this one pass, letting this war end. Over on the Chinese side, they took one territory out. Kind of missed that. It happened, well, I forget about things sometimes. And then they sieged another one. They're going to have to withdraw from that. All right, well, we're on to all the bookkeeping stuff for the end of the turn. Okay, so we pushed the turn marker towards turn 41, 1690 turn, and what do we got? That's going to be an election for the Holy Roman Empire again. But the French managed to get everyone but Spain into an enforced peace. Now, Spain could have chosen to let everyone else off the hook, kind of, by saying, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll take my losses, and we'll all take them with me, but you're not going to lose anything. That didn't work out too well, though, from Spain's perspective. They thought, well, maybe England's going to take a loss, etc. England managed to get away with a positive net score against France, so they accepted a white peace with France. They had to accept a white peace, or if France had an advantage on them, they'd have to accept the advantage that France took. So England's out of the war. The Dutch, well, they took a peace of level 3 against them, which means that they're going to end up owing $225 to France next turn that they've got to funnel into the French economy. That's going to make France quite potent against Spain, and Spain probably made a mistake here because they're going to be bleeding some points next turn. They're still going to be in the war. They're still in the war with Turkey as well. But that's dropped everyone to the point where next turn they have to make it out of that -3 hole. That's a tough thing to do. We saw Spain manage to pull their way out. But it's always a crapshoot whether or not you can get out of it. And honestly, Spain's got allies, etc. Yes, they're back a few points right now. They're back, they're back 4 against both. And they're not going to really be able to recover against Turkey. So they really should have surrendered. Given that everyone else was forced to. But, well, they didn't. And so they're forced into this war for another turn. Which isn't terribly good for France either. France would have liked to get out of the war completely. Now they're going to be fighting Spain. Well, the Dutch don't really get to recover too much, but they'll get some advantage off of it. And the English certainly could use the time to clear up Ireland, and also maybe their colonial problem. So it's kind of an interesting situation. Russia also didn't get out of the war. They could have had the white peace. They chose not to. And they're bleeding some points too. So I think some bad decisions were made there anyway. Anyway, this one's going up. And we'll see how the next turn goes.